I mean, okay, take it for instance. They put me, every gig I do.
Behind the eyeliner, the stage fire, and the haunting howl of a voice that helped define heavy metal lived a man who never pretended to be anyone but himself. Ozzy Osbourne, the so-called Prince of Darkness, has been many things over the decades: a trailblazer, a survivor, a provocateur, and a legend. But one thing he never was, not even for a moment, was fake.
It's like, I think there's a wild man in everybody, you know. It's like all I am is a conductor of mayhem.
In a world where stardom often hides compromise, Ozzy built his name on chaos and truth, and sometimes that truth meant speaking out. Not every band earned his respect. Some triggered his scorn. For Ozzy, music was sacred. It had to come from the soul, not a marketing department. What unfolded over the decades was not just a series of disagreements, it was a war for the heart of metal. And buried within it, the story of one man's refusal to let music lose its bite. It was the summer of 1998 when a new generation collided with the old guard in a way that neither side would forget. Ozzy Osbourne was at the center of Ozzfest, his namesake festival, a celebration of metal in all its forms. But when Limp Bizkit took the stage, something shifted. Their rap rock bravado, backward hats, and brash energy weren't just different. To Ozzy, they felt like an invasion. Backstage, whispers started to swirl, that Ozzy wasn't amused, that he saw the act as more performance than musicianship. Witnesses say he watched with arms crossed, eyes narrowed, saying little but saying everything. What stung even more came after. Frontman Fred Durst allegedly mocked Ozzy in a radio interview, suggesting he was past his prime. For someone who'd clawed back from rock bottom more than once, that wasn't just rude, it was sacrilege. The distance between them only widened with time. When asked in later years about the wave of new metal bands, Ozzy's answers were polite but cold, laced with a hint of disdain. Some movements, he once said cryptically, are better left in the past. He didn't need to name names. His silence was louder than most musicians' screams. And it wasn't about genre, it was about soul. To Ozzy, real metal had blood in its veins and dirt under its nails. What he saw in Limp Bizkit wasn't rebellion, it was choreography. Manufactured rage wrapped in marketing. And for a man who'd made a career by bleeding on stage, that was unforgivable. The tension never erupted into open war, but the damage was done. Ozzfest would never showcase Limp Bizkit again. In Ozzy's eyes, they had failed the ultimate test, not of popularity, but of authenticity. While the 80s glam explosion lit up MTV and filled arenas, Ozzy Osbourne watched the spectacle with growing unease. Among the glitter and power ballads stood Bon Jovi, clean-cut, camera-ready, beloved by millions. But for Ozzy, something didn't sit right. It wasn't jealousy, it was something deeper. A sense that the raw edge of rock was being sanded down into something glossy, packaged, and safe. At the 1987 Moscow Music Peace Festival, Ozzy and Bon Jovi shared a lineup. Backstage, things were civil, but far from warm. Ozzy reportedly kept his distance, offering only a nod as the New Jersey band passed. He didn't need to speak. His face said enough. The spectacle of Bon Jovi's set, with its flawless lighting and rehearsed choreography, felt to Ozzy like a betrayal of what rock was supposed to be. "It's a West End musical with guitars," he once muttered to a friend. To him, Bon Jovi weren't rebels. They were entertainers in leather jackets. And that distinction mattered. While Ozzy wrestled personal demons and recorded gut-wrenching albums like No Rest for the Wicked, Bon Jovi soared on the wings of pop appeal. Their music wasn't dangerous, it was digestible. And for a man who believed music should make you uncomfortable before it made you sing, that was a red line. Over time, their paths rarely crossed again. When asked about the glam metal era in interviews, Ozzy often deflected, but you could sense his discomfort. His silence wasn't out of kindness, it was a boundary. He would not be dragged into a war of words, but he wouldn't lie either. Rock was supposed to sting, not smile. And in Ozzy's book, no amount of album sales could rewrite the truth. Not all fame was forged in fire. Some of it, he believed, came pre-packaged. In 1984, two of the wildest forces in music collided on one tour bus, and what started as camaraderie would end in silent animosity. Ozzy Osbourne and Motley Crue were, on paper, a perfect pairing. Chaos met chaos. But on the road, something cracked. The bands tried to outdo each other night after night. Pranks, stunts, excess beyond reason. But behind the scenes, Ozzy wasn't impressed. He saw something in the crew's behavior that rang false. Where he had lived the madness, they seemed to be playing a part. According to stories from the crew, Ozzy once told his manager, "They're actors in a horror film I've lived." The infamous story of Ozzy snorting ants to shock the younger band wasn't just absurd, it was a message. You want chaos? Let me show you the real thing. The relationship deteriorated from there. Nikki Sixx would later speak fondly of Ozzy, but insiders say Ozzy never quite forgave what he saw as mimicry. The final blow came in the studio. An engineer recalled Ozzy listening to one of Crew's newer tracks, then tossing the tape across the room in disgust. "They've gone soft," he reportedly muttered. "Used to be dangerous, now it's cartoon metal." And perhaps that was the heart of it. Ozzy's demons weren't theatrics, they were scars. When he saw bands turn rebellion into choreography, it didn't just annoy him, it betrayed something sacred. Over the years, he rarely spoke about the Crew. Not out of fear, but because he'd already made up his mind. They were no longer real to him, just another band that mistook costume for chaos. In the kingdom of metal, Ozzy believed authenticity was the only crown worth wearing. And once he decided you'd traded it for showmanship, there was no coming back. For Ozzy, music was a mirror, raw, cracked, and honest. So when a band like Kiss, known more for spectacle than sorrow, rose to prominence, it rubbed him the wrong way. Their makeup, pyrotechnics, and larger-than-life personas created a show no one could ignore. But Ozzy didn't want to be watched. He wanted to be felt. The friction started early, back when Black Sabbath and Kiss shared festival lineups in the mid-70s. Ozzy reportedly whispered to a roadie once, "It's like watching a circus with guitars." And that sentiment never quite left. Their rivalry deepened not on stage but in philosophy. Gene Simmons allegedly offered Ozzy marketing advice at a record label party in the 80s. Ozzy's reported reply was sharp, "I make music, not merchandise." It wasn't just a jab, it was a dividing line. Where Kiss built an empire on toys and t-shirts, Ozzy believed music should make you bleed before it made you rich. Years later, when a journalist asked Ozzy to describe Kiss in one word, he reportedly paused and said, "Plastic." To him, their showmanship eclipsed soul, and soul was everything. Even as Kiss filled stadiums, Ozzy kept his distance. He never accused, never attacked, but his disinterest was its own kind of judgment. For someone who had faced addiction, loss, and near death with a microphone in hand, makeup and fireworks felt like a distraction from the truth. Fans still debate whether the disdain was professional or personal, but maybe for Ozzy there was no difference. The stage was sacred, and if you stepped onto it wearing a mask, you weren't just hiding from the crowd, you were hiding from yourself. In Ozzy's world, honesty was louder than any guitar solo, and Kiss, in all their fire-breathing glory, never quite passed that test. Guns N' Roses were once hailed as the future of rock, loud, dangerous, unpredictable. And in the late 80s, Ozzy Osbourne seemed to believe in them too. He welcomed them as the opening act on his No Rest for the Wicked tour in 1988. But hope quickly turned to frustration. Axl Rose was often late. Band drama followed them like a second tour bus. Ozzy reportedly said, "They're not dangerous, they're inconvenient." Things came to a head in Philadelphia when the band delayed their set for nearly 2 hours. Ozzy, known for respecting fans even at his lowest, allegedly stormed into their dressing room and let loose. By the next show, Guns N' Roses were off the tour. The betrayal lingered. As the years went on and the band's image became more polished, Ozzy's opinion reportedly soured further. In private, he was said to scoff at their reinventions. "They started as wolves," he once muttered to a friend. "Now they're just well-dressed sheep." When Slash briefly joined Ozzy's band in the 90s, the old feud reignited in whispers. Ozzy would joke about Axl, comparing him to a drama school dropout trying to play rebel. And when Guns N' Roses reunited years later, Ozzy didn't celebrate. He reportedly told a friend, "Comebacks are for the bored, not the brave." He wasn't being cruel, he was being consistent. For Ozzy, the worst thing a band could do wasn't failing, it was forgetting who they were. Guns N' Roses, in his eyes, had started with fire and ended with fireworks. And though the fans returned in droves, Ozzy stayed silent. Not because he didn't care, but because he did. Deeply. Enough to mourn what he believed the band could have been. In his mind, they were more than a missed opportunity. They were a warning. Of all the feuds that followed Ozzy through the years, none cut deeper than the one with Judas Priest. Both bands emerged from the ashes of post-war England, shaped by the same factories, the same fog, the same rage. And for a time, they walked the same path. But as Black Sabbath began to stumble in the late 70s, Judas Priest surged forward, and what might have been friendly competition turned bitter. Ozzy reportedly saw their rise not as coincidence but betrayal. "They waited for me to fall," he once confided to a friend, "so they could take the crown." The rivalry intensified when Priest recruited KK Downing, a guitarist Ozzy had allegedly hoped to bring into his solo band. The move wasn't just professional, it felt personal. When Priest frontman Rob Halford allegedly dismissed Ozzy's vocal style backstage at the Monsters of Rock festival in 1986, the tension exploded. Ozzy had to be physically restrained, yelling, "I built the road you're walking on." After that, there was no going back. Decades passed, and both bands continued to thrive. But whenever award shows tried to bring them together, Ozzy declined. "I don't need a plaque to know I matter," he told a reporter once. "I've been singing to the damned long before they got fancy jackets." Even when Judas Priest were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Ozzy's response was cool, almost dismissive. The feud had become something larger than two bands. It was a clash of identities. For Ozzy, it was never about charts or accolades. It was about soul, scars, and the struggle behind the sound. Judas Priest may have shared the stage of history with him, but in his eyes, they never quite shared the same fight. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Ozzy Osbourne's musical feuds are more than footnotes in heavy metal history. They are the echoes of a man who refused to let music lose its meaning. Behind every cold shoulder and cryptic remark was a belief that art must be lived, not sold. These weren't petty rivalries, they were battle cries against a changing industry. Ozzy didn't just defend metal, he bled for it. Through heartbreak, addiction, betrayal, and survival, he clung to one truth: music must come from the soul, and if that truth meant burning bridges to preserve the fire, so be it. He never chased popularity, he chased honesty, and in doing so became not just the Prince of Darkness, but one of its most fearless guardians. If this story moved you, hit like, and tell us which Golden Age rocker you'd like us to uncover next. There's always another tale in the shadows of stardom.